Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Randy Opfer with the California Air Resources Board. Hopefully, you're here to participate with us in a clean truck check overview. We will begin just in a few moments. One of the issues we have in these Zoom webinars is that, well, first of all, the people that were in the waiting room, it might take a couple seconds for people to actually get into the meeting. But we have a number of people that log in right at 1 o'clock, and the time period it takes for them to get in can be up to a minute or two. So even though I don't like starting late, we're going to start in just a couple minutes to make sure everybody has an opportunity to log in before we start going through the information. So just bear with me. We will get going here in just a second. Again, good afternoon, everybody. This is Randy Opfer with the California Air Resources Board. We will begin just momentarily. I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to log in before we start dispensing with the information. We appreciate your time and we respect your time. I just would like to make sure that everybody has had an opportunity to log in. Once I see the numbers kind of level off, we will get going post haste. All right, well, it looks like the numbers are slowing down a little bit. We'll let these people catch up with us, the ones that haven't logged in yet. For those that just joined us, my name is Randy Opfer, again with the California Air Resources Board. Here, hopefully, you're here for the same reason all of our staff are. We're here to go over the Clean Truck Check program. This is an overview that will last for just about an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, depends. But before I can get into the information, I do need to go over a few administrative things, one of which is the timing. So this is starts at 1 o'clock, and the way it's going to go is that there is about a 20 to 25 minute slide presentation, which I will be giving, and then we go into a question and answer, a live question and answer. So for the moment, you cannot ask live questions until I'm finished with the actual presentation. If you do have questions during the slide presentation, there is a Q&A box in your taskbar. If just look there, there'll be one that says chat, one that says Q&A. Go to the Q&A, post your questions there. We have several staff members operating with us this afternoon that can answer those questions as we go through. Once the presentation slides are complete, I will have Anthony Poggi come online and he will actually start to proctor live questions. At that point, you're going to need to raise your hand and he will call on you one at a time. He'll ask you to, open your mic or turn your mic on so that everybody can hear you. We'll go through that, and the length of the entire presentation and afternoon will be based upon how many questions we answer. We have several expert staff here today that can answer these questions, and Anthony Gazzetta is going to be doing the live question answers, so be prepared for that. He's got a lot of really good information. If you go through this presentation and you get all the questions and answers and find that later on that you would like to review or revisit some of the information, this is being recorded, and there will be a link to that recording available sometime after we're done with the presentation, obviously. Usually it takes anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours. If you want to send me an email, we try and send it out to all the participants. You should get a link to that, but if you don't happen to see it or don't happen to get the link, shoot me an email and I will be sure to make sure you get a copy of that. Let's see, what else is there? Um, I think I already went through timing. Yeah. Anthony Poggia, is there anything else administratively we need to go over?
I don't believe so, Randy. I think you covered it all. I see one hand raised. Again, we will be addressing raised hands. I'd ask you to not raise your hands until we get to the Q&A portion. Thank you for lowering it. But we will address raised hands as they come up during the Q&A. And again, as Randy said, you can also uh, type a written question into the Q&A box, and staff will provide you with a written answer. Thanks, Randy. Go ahead.
Fantastic. All right. All right, let's get into the meat of the conversation here and go over the slide presentations. Again, this is the Clean Truck Check program. It is an overview of the program. By the time I'm finished, you will have a large amount of information about the program, not all the fine points. There is more information available to you, and I'll give you some links where you can find that. First thing we need to discuss is what this program actually is. So this program is was created to make sure that all the vehicles, the heavy duty vehicles on California roads are operating in a way that maintains the emission systems that they were created with to as close to factory standards as possible. It involves a number of different aspects on how to ensure that that happens, and I will be going through all those. It does provide an avenue for us to check to see that people are maintaining their vehicles, and it doesn't apply to every vehicle. If I had to make a statement about what this program is, generally speaking, I'd say it was very much like the smog check program that the Bureau of Automotive Repair operates, with one very big detail, and that is that it doesn't apply to all the passenger vehicles that the smog check program does. This applies to only those non-gasoline and alternative fueled heavy duty vehicles that are over 14,000 pounds gross vehicle weight rating. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but let's get on to the next slide here. There are only three components to this program to make sure if you have one of these trucks, that you're in compliance. The first thing is that if you have a vehicle that meets the definition that I will give momentarily, you have to report that vehicle. So you have to create a vehicle within a reporting system that we call CTC Viz. I'll give you that more information about that in a few slides, but for now, just understand that there is a reporting system that you will have to deal with. There is a compliance fee associated with this regulation and this program. Every vehicle that you do report will be required to pay a compliance fee on an annual basis. Again, I'll talk more about that shortly. And then finally, and perhaps more importantly than anything else, there is a testing procedure that each of these vehicles will have to go through and pass in order to remain compliant. Here are some of the example vehicles that we regulate. And just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here, when I say heavy duty vehicle that falls into this program, again, we're talking about the gross vehicle weight rating. And we have had questions in the past from people who don't know what that number is, what that phrase is. So a heavy duty vehicle over 14,000 pounds GVWR. The GVWR is assigned at the manufacturer. It is a number that designates the maximum capacity of that vehicle that is allowed to carry over the road. It is not something that ever changes or changes very rarely. It's not something that you can easily change. And that's one of the reasons why we use it, because it is a static number. Where do you find that number? For most of these vehicles, it's going to be on the driver's side door jamb. There will be a tag there that lists several weights, and one of them will say either GVWR, gross weight, or GVW. If you see a number like that on that tag, that is the number that we're looking for. The second thing we look for to make sure you fall into this program is that that number is over 14,000, first of all, and that second of all, you run on something other than gasoline. The engine is running on something other than gasoline. So we're talking about diesel engines. All diesel engines over 14,000 pounds GVWR are part of this program. All alternative fueled vehicles, that would be your natural gas, your propane, and some combination thereof. And any vehicle at all that meets those constraints and is in California on our roads is going to fall under this type of program. One of those vehicles that has not been falling under our programs in the past, but is falling under this one, are motorhomes. So I want to focus for just a moment on motorhomes. First and foremost, we have some people that have been led to believe that there's a ban on the use or sale of motorhomes in the state of California, and that is absolutely not true. There is no ban on the use or sale of motorhomes in this state. They are required if they are running on an engine that is not gasoline, again, diesel or some hybrid type fuel, and over 14,000 pounds, they do fall under this program and they will have to comply with it in the way that every other truck does. And again, I'll tell you more about what the actual requirements are as we go through this. But there will be an annual compliance fee and there will be a test for those motorhomes that qualify. This is California registered motorhomes. I do need to make sure you understand that as well. For those motorhomes that are registered outside the state, they are not part of this program. They can drive in our state and not have to deal with the testing procedures. This may look familiar. It has a lot of similar information. I put it in here specifically because I want to reiterate a couple different things and I want to add something in addition to it. So almost all non-gasoline motorhomes that are over 14,000 pounds will be in this program. As I said, it doesn't include those registered outside the state. And if you do have a gasoline motorhome, there's a significant possibility that that motorhome will fall under the Bureau of Automotive Repair smog check program, even if it is over the 14,000 pounds. So it's not that we don't test those vehicles, it's that they're tested by another agency that operates in the state of California. And one of the other questions that we get fairly regularly is what about the Sprinter type vans? Every time I see one of the things, I wonder how much more expensive they can get. But these vans are possibly in the program. The biggest thing I can ponder to determine that is number one, is it running on diesel or alternative fuels? And number two, is it over 14,000 pounds? If those two things are true, then yes, the Sprinter type vans or conversion vans will be part of this requirement. Let's go through the steps that I mentioned earlier for compliance with this program. The first step is to report the vehicles. I told you that the reporting system is called CTC Viz. That stands for Clean Truck Check Vehicle Inspection System, and it can be found at the Clean Truck Check website. Once you get to this particular website, and I'm going to show you a picture of it, that's where you're going to enter your information to be compliant with this program. One thing I'll say before I get there is the fact that some of you may already be in a system that's operated by the ARB called Truckers, Trucrs. That is a completely separate reporting system that was created to determine compliance with a different regulation, the truck and bus regulation. The good thing about that system is that if you happen to have a vehicle that is in that system, you can transfer the data or the data can be pulled from truckers and brought into CTC Viz. So you won't have to re-enter everything. So be aware that that is a possibility. This is what the main screen looks like if you're going to the CTC Viz registration system. You can see that there's a area to log in. There's a place to create an account right there. You can look up vehicles that are in the system, and there's also a place where you can find helpful information. 2 points of note that I'd like to accentuate here. Number one, this particular reporting system has been optimized to work with Microsoft Edge. So if you happen to be using a different browser and have problems, before you try and call a support system or anybody at our office, try and open the thing up in a Microsoft Edge web browser. It could eliminate the issues that you're having. And the helpful links are something where you really, if you have questions before you try and go through the email or phone call areas of our program, you should look through the helpful links. Almost anything and everything you can imagine related to this program and to the reporting system can be found under helpful links. Our staff here at the ARB has done a tremendous job in trying to make sure that that information is available in multiple ways for anybody that needs that information. So what kind of information are we talking about when we deal with reporting? So we need the fleet and owner information, and we need information on every vehicle in that fleet to be input into the CTC Viz system. The California DMV registration system is tied, or we tie it to the CTC Viz program or the CTC program, because in order to get your registration for any of the vehicles that were mentioned as being part of this program, you do need to have them in the CTC Viz system, and they do need to be compliant. So any vehicle operating in California that's over 14,000 pounds, non-gasoline, is possibly going to have issues with DMV registration if they aren't compliant with the CTC program. One additional thing that I'm going to mention is if you have changes, and everybody can always have changes with their setup, whether they add vehicles, get rid of vehicles, sell, buy, whatever the case may be. If you make a change to the fleet that you have reported into CTC Viz, it's important that you understand you should come back in and make those changes within your account. We don't know that you've done those things automatically. And if it comes to pass that we're looking through the CTC Viz system and trying to determine compliance, or if our enforcement division is looking through CTC Viz trying to determine compliance, they're going to base their decisions on what's in the reporting system. So if you have made a change and it's not updated, we're going to start with bad information. So as much as possible, make sure that you update that information. The regulation does actually stipulate that it has to be within 30 days of the change. There's no citation for that. Just make sure that you get the system updated as soon as possible. The annual compliance fee is also, as I mentioned earlier, part of this. When the legislature wrote the language to have ARB build this program, they did insert the idea that there would be a compliance fee or an annual compliance fee associated with this program to pay for the program. Now, the current annual compliance fee is somewhere in the 30, I think it's 31 something, but it will change every year based on the consumer price index. You can make these payments with credit cards, debit cards, e-checks. We don't accept paper checks or cash anymore. And if you have multiple vehicles that have to be reported and go through this, there are ways to do batch payments for your annual compliance fee. And if you find that you've reported your vehicle and you've tested the vehicle and the system still shows as non-compliant, it is possible that that compliance fee is the reason why it's showing up that way. Once you put all the information in the system and the compliance fee has been paid and you've tested the vehicle and it's tested past that test, it is possible that you can get a certificate of completion or a certificate of compliance through the CTC Viz system. Now, this is not something that ARB needs. It's part of our reporting system that you get when everything's kosher. Many people ask us what this certificate is for. It's for you. It's for you, the owner of the vehicle, and it's for you if you ever are asked by somebody who's trying to hire you to do business in the state. Because there is another part of this regulation that stipulates that if you are a business that is hiring somebody to operate a truck that falls under this program, you need to ensure that you're hiring compliant vehicles and compliant fleets. One of the mechanisms that anybody doing that kind of hiring can use to make the determination that they are in compliance by hiring compliant fleets is to check the certificate of compliance for those fleets. So you can carry it with you if you happen to run into one of our enforcement people or activities. It's not going to do them any good for you to hand it to them because they verify what they see in the field. As I said before, I was going to give you some resources. So there are some guidance and frequently asked questions or FAQs. We have a number of training videos available. We have a user guide for the reporting system, and we have links to upcoming training like the one you're participating in today. That QR code you see on the screen, you could put your phone up to that and take a picture, and it should lead you right to the page where all these resources are. So later on, if you want to get a copy of this via video, that's just something that you should be able to use to get that information. All right, step number three. So we've talked about who's in this program. We've talked about the reporting. We've talked about the compliance fee. And now we need to talk about the actual testing procedure that the vehicles will have to go through in order to be compliant. It is a smog test. It's not exactly the same as a smog test that passenger vehicles go through, but it is a type of smog inspection. And for purposes of compliance in this program, most vehicles are going to have to be tested currently twice per year. The first deadline is going to be associated with the month your registration is due. Now, if you have a vehicle that is on some type of alternate registration where you don't have an annual registration like most vehicles do, you still have a month associated with that. That's something that can be found out through DMV. That will always be your start point. The second test will be 6 months after whatever that first test date is. So if you have your registration due by the end of January, say for example, then the next test is going to be due by the end of July. So January, July, 6 months apart. Now, that test can be performed at any point 90 days prior to the end of the month that it's due. That's 3 months. So you could actually test for a January due date. You could test in October of the previous year. Now, most vehicles, actually all vehicles in this program currently right now, other than a couple of basic examples, which I'll go over momentarily, are due twice per year, as I said. Starting in 2027, most onboard or OBD vehicles, don't worry about that phrase. I'm going to actually go over what OBD stands for in a minute. But most OBD vehicles are going to move to a 4 times per year testing schedule in 2027. That's going to scare people. I understand that that might not make you very happy. I will tell you that right now the test is the OBD test is a fairly simple test, and there are ways to get this done without you having to go too much out of your way. If you don't know when you need to test and you have registered your vehicle, the CTC Viz system will send out a monthly summary to whatever email is registered with that system, and it will let you know which vehicles, if you have more than one, obviously it could be any of them, but which vehicles will be due for testing in the upcoming month. Now, the emission testing for annual testing. So I told you that most vehicles are doing twice per year, and most vehicles will move to 4 times per year in 2027. But there are two different vehicles that will not ever go past what they are currently. So if you have a vehicle that is registered as an ag vehicle in the CTC program, you're due for one test per year, and that will stay the same as long as you have that vehicle in this program. If you ever sell a vehicle, then it's whoever purchases its problem to deal with. But as long as you own it, and as long as it's registered in the system as ag, it's once per year. Personally used motorhomes, they are in the program, as I said, but their testing procedure will only also have to happen once per year. The last thing I would say about that is that if you have a vehicle, an older vehicle, I'm going to go over this again on the next slide, but I just want to start with this. Some of the older vehicles are going to stick with twice per year and never move to the 4 times per year. So let's talk about that when we go over emission test methods. So the breakdown is this. If you have a vehicle with an engine that is 2013 or newer, that is the year that the diesel engines first came with a standardized onboard diagnostics or OBD system. OBD, or onboard diagnostics, is just a computer system that manages what's going on with the engine and monitors everything that's happening with the vehicle itself. We're really concerned about the emission compliance or the emission components, so the OBD systems monitor that as well. And the standardized 2013 or newer engines, all we need for that test is a download of the data from the computer to determine whether or not your vehicle's compliance. So for those vehicles, there's not actually an emissions being drawn from the engine itself. It's just the data file that we're looking for. If you have an alternatively fueled engine or hybrid alternative engine, Those didn't become standardized with onboard diagnostics until the 2018 model year. So anything 2018 model year engine and newer will also go through this data download type procedure. Additional thing that I'd like to mention about that model year. That is not the model year of the vehicle. That gets confusing for a lot of people. We're talking about the engine itself because for emission purposes, engines are certified to a model year by the federal government. And if you have a vehicle that is, say, a 2020 or 2022, it's almost without exception that you're not going to have the same model year engine as the model year of the vehicle. Typically, more than 90% of the vehicles, as it is a typical number, will have an engine that is 1 year older than the actual age of the vehicle itself. So my 2021 is going to have a 2020 engine. My 2022 is going to have a 2021 engine. Now, it's not always true, but most of the time it is. So we're looking for the engine model year, not the vehicle model year. But what about the older engines? So anything that has a 2012 or older diesel engine or a 2017 and older alternatively fueled engine, they do not have standardized OBD systems. Some of those will have onboard diagnostics. They just were prior to the standardization of the OBD systems. So all those vehicles that are in that category, and I'll call them older vehicles, they have to go through a different testing procedure. This was a testing procedure called an opacity test that is dictated by the SAE J1667 test procedure. It's been called a number of things: snap tests, smog, or yes, smog test is another choice, puff test, smoke test. Any one of these is talking about the same thing. It is a method by which whoever's conducting the test puts an emissions monitor in the exhaust stack and also has a little handheld device that's attached to it. And they ask the driver or whoever owns the vehicle to put the vehicle in park or neutral, turn the engine on, and step on the accelerator for a couple seconds, three separate times, while we get a measurement of the amount of smoke that's coming out that stack. That is a smoke test. So that's the type of test that you have to do with these non-OBD or older engines. Associated with that for diesel engines is something called a visual inspection of the emission control components. The best thing I can do to try and make you picture this in your mind's eye is draw you back to any time you've ever gone to a regular smog check program with your passenger vehicle. I'm sure many of you have had to do that over the years, and maybe you've watched the technicians go out there with the clipboard, walk around and look at the engine in a variety of places and check things off. What they're doing is verifying that the emission control components that the tag on the engine says are supposed to be there are actually there and that they appear to be hooked up and functioning. That is a visual inspection, and it is also part of the older type test for the CTC program. For the 2017 and older alternatively fueled engines, they do not have an SAE procedure for doing a smoke test for those vehicles, so those vehicles will have to go through just the visual emission of the emission control components in visual inspection, sorry, in order to determine compliance. Now we've talked about the testing. So who can do the testing? It has to be somebody that is known as a CTC credentialed tester, and that can be anybody. We have created a training course. It's a video-driven online free course that anybody can take. And it's, I think, 6 modules where you watch the videos, listen to what's going on, and then there's a test at the end that you have to pass with an 80% or better. Once you do that, then you become a credentialed tester for 2 years. Again, there's no cost to this. There's a link on the page right there where you can go and see and become a tester yourself. The tester list is public for those people that wish to have their information listed on it. You don't have to, but when you do become a tester, there is a button that you can click or a box that you can check that will allow your name to be part of the list. Now, what about trying to find a tester? So if you remember, I don't have a picture of it here, but if you remember the login screen for the CTC Viz system or the CTC Viz program, one of the boxes down there said find a tester. So that is linked, and there's the web address for it. That is linked to a database of all those individuals that have become credentialed, and during that process, check the box that I was just talking about a moment ago. That box again allows your name and information or contact information to be available to anybody that wants to search for it to supposedly hire you to do a test for them. This database is searchable. You can put almost any information that would link a tester to you, say zip code, address, phone number, things like that. And it should populate a list of those testers that meet the criteria that you're putting in there. The only thing I would caution you on is that the list of testers is only as good as the amount of information that you put in there. If you put in a zip code, for example, only the testers that are in that zip code are going to come up on your list. And so if there happens to be surrounding zip codes that you didn't put in, you might have to do an additional search to determine if there are testers in those additional zip codes. The second half of the testing procedure is the device that's used to conduct the testing. So we also certify testing devices at the Air Resources Board, and only those devices that have been CARB certified can be used for compliance. For a newer OBD type test, it's a handheld tool that is plugged into the OBD system, which there's a port that's typically under the or the driver's steering column that is connected to the OBD system, and that little handheld device is just drawing that data file out. Now that gets connected to a computer where the technician basically pushes the buttons to submit the test, and that test goes directly to ARB, and there should be a response within just a few minutes, depending on your circumstance. If you happen to be outside of cell service, it could take longer, but it is possible to get an answer as to whether or not your vehicle passes the smog inspection within a very short period of time. We do have a list of these testing devices, so if you are considering becoming a CTC credentialed tester, then you want to know which devices are able to be used for those tests. One last thing about the testing devices. If you happen to have an older vehicle that is not onboard diagnostics compliant, the device that you use has been around for a long time. There's a number of them, and there are many that are actually certified to be used to provide that kind of test as well, and they are listed on this website as well. I want to get into a little bit of enforcement action. So, aside from the CTC Viz program, the reporting system, credentialed testers, and the testing devices, and the compliance fee, besides all that, we have an enforcement staff that operate out in the field, and they are constantly doing emissions testing and roadside monitoring all throughout California. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because it's you may or may not ever run into our enforcement staff, but if you happen to see anything like that's what's pictured there, it's an upside down L-shaped device that the truck is driving under. That is a emission screener. It's called a REMD or remote emissions monitoring device. It takes a grab sample or a very small sample of the exhaust gas as the truck passes under it, and it analyzes that within just a few seconds to give the enforcement staff in the field the understanding as to whether or not they have found something called a possible high emitter. So this is a screening tool. We don't write tickets based on this tool because we have to verify that the tool is giving us correct information. And there are some things that can go wrong with it, but it gives us a screening or an idea that we have a vehicle that's out of compliance. And in the field, the enforcement staff will actually take a closer look at that vehicle and do additional tests on it to see if it has failed or passed the CTC test. Some of these enforcement monitoring stations are manned by our staff, and some of them are in locations where they're not manned. And if you happen to be driving through an area, a way station or an ag station where we have one of these things, and you get identified as a possible high emitter, then you may get a letter in the mail. The owner may get a letter in the mail. It's called an NST. It's a notice to submit to testing. It is going to tell you that the remote monitoring device found your vehicle as a possible high emitter on this date at this time, and we take pictures of the identifying information like the license plate and things like that. And if you do get that letter, whoever owns the vehicle has 30 days to get a passing test submitted to the CTC Viz system. If you don't comply with that and get it within 30 days, you should at least call and talk to us about it. But if you don't do anything, then your registration is going to have a hold put on it, and there could possibly be some penalties associated with that. Over and above everything else, the reporting system is designed to help us understand who's compliant and who's not, and help us make sure that these vehicles are operating as they were designed throughout their life. Now, the system, since we cannot test every vehicle in the state, it's actually not possible for us to individually test every vehicle. We rely heavily upon you, the owners, to input correct information and ensure the accuracy of that information. As such, when you're putting the information in the CTC Viz, there will be a screen that pops up where you basically have to click a button saying that everything you put in there is true to the best of your knowledge. Once you click that, then we have the legal authority to act upon any information that you've input into the system. So be aware that you're telling us that you're putting in correct and truthful information, and it's your responsibility to make sure it's accurate. An additional thing I'd like to go over is the idea of changing your fleet either by buying a vehicle or selling a vehicle. So we've had some issues with people who have purchased vehicles that were not compliant and they did not know this. Before you purchase a vehicle, it is kind of a buyer's beware thing. You're going to make sure that you ask for a clean truck check compliance certificate and check the issue date on that certificate. Compliance requires that the vehicle, for you, if you purchase a new vehicle, that you report that purchase within 30 days, and that you pay the annual compliance fee if it's due, and then you test the vehicle by the due dates that are listed for that vehicle in CTC. For sellers, if you're selling a vehicle, you make sure you deactivate the vehicle, that whichever one you sold within your CTC Viz account. And that this is for two purposes. I mean, it's a two-sided system in that if you're purchasing a vehicle and the person you bought it from does not take it out of their account, you're going to have a problem trying to get DMV registration, especially if it's not been tested and properly or had its compliance fee paid. Because in our system, it's still listed as being owned and operated by the previous person. That change needs to happen in order for you, the buyer, to register that vehicle. And on the seller side of things, if you sell a vehicle and you don't take it out, then you could be held liable for something that happens related to this program after you don't have it anymore. So just make sure that that transfer happens properly and that we can get the information for the correct ownership. Let's see. Finally, this afternoon for me, I wanted to give you a list of resources. There's a homepage, smoke meter manufacturers. I've got the link there for you, the link of the Carpet Credential Tester for training purposes if you want to become one of those. And you're going to probably hear this 100 times this afternoon. If you have questions that are not answered by this webinar and by the Q&A that's coming up, we do have an email that you can submit all your questions to or issues that you may have with your vehicle. It's hdim@arb.ca.gov. It's answered by a number of staff, and they are very diligent about making sure that the emails get taken care of on an appropriate manner, in an appropriate manner, in a relatively short period of time. So that is your avenue to get the information that you need. And at this point, we're going to go to live questions. So, Anthony, you can take over here if you like.
Thank you, Randy, very much. Excuse me. All right. So we can now start the live Q&A. You're welcome to continue to enter questions into the Q&A box. It looks like we've had almost 30 of them answered so far. If you would like to ask a question verbally, please raise your hand. I will call on you, and then I will ask you to unmute your microphone, and then we'll do our best to answer your questions. So with that, If you have a question you would like to ask verbally, please go ahead and raise your hand, and I will keep an eye out. All right. Trina Van Hoos is our first one. Trina, go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Trina. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We are new to the system, and I've kind of self-taught myself on, what I found out with this website that you all had available. And we did our first carb check, and I've got that submitted, but I didn't get a new certificate, even though it's in there. And I was having trouble retrieving that. And it may be that it didn't expire. You know what I mean? Like we got the first certificate, and then we got the carb check, and then I was expecting another certificate, but I never got one.
Okay, so
Where do I go to get the certificate?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it sounds like you're asking about like an updated certificate for the next cycle.
Yes.
So if the compliance fee is paid for the, excuse me, the current cycle and the test is completed for the current cycle, assuming that compliance fee has been paid, I know you've gotten your test done, you would just need to click on the VIN itself within your account and scroll down a little bit till you find the certificate section. And then you
Okay.
should see one that generated whenever, like the test was completed. Again, assuming the compliance fee was paid ahead of the test or wasn't due for this cycle specifically.
Okay.
And then you should see an issue date with that date on it. And then you should see the next expiration date. And then you can just click view/download on that, assuming it's generated already, and you should be able to get it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's one we hear about a lot.
Yeah, well, I didn't see it, and I'm like, it's got to be there somewhere. But anyway, I thought, well, I'll just ask during this training. If it's something they send automatically, or I'm just in the wrong area, or just whatever it was.
Yeah, it's something we've had discussions about making more prominent, but it's given the structure of the system, it can be a little difficult to do that.
Right.
So just make sure to click on the VIN and go down to that certificate section. And again,
Okay.
just make sure you don't have a compliance fee due within like the next, 2 months or so. And if you're all caught up for this cycle, then you should be able to get that certificate by clicking on the VIN and just scrolling down a bit to that
Okay.
certificates section.
All right. Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Trina. Before we move on, I am going to just say that we usually, these webinars usually last at most about 2 hours, and we're about 42 minutes in, which means we have plenty of time for questions. I'll also say that while you're all here, we have quite a few people, 324 people, and we're very happy to see this large group here for the webinar, and we thank you for your time and for joining us. This is a much quicker way to get your questions answered than going by email or going through the call center. We are happy to provide all the resources, but this is probably the most instantaneous way to get your questions answered. So before you log off today, please sit and think hard about something you may want to ask, because this is the quickest way to get it answered. So just want to say that before we go on to our next raised hand. Brian Fomenko, I hope I said your name right. Brian, go ahead and unmute your microphone. Looks like you're unmuted. Go ahead and try to talk, Brian.
How are we doing now?
Good.
Yeah, you're a little quiet, Brian. You seem a little bit far away from your microphone, but if you speak up, we should be able to hear you.
Okay. I got a couple of questions here.
Sure.
One of them regarding the certificates. I get this, I get the system activity form here, and it says that a zip file containing your certificates is ready to download. But as I try to download it, nothing happens. So I don't get the certificates after I've done the testing, for one. And then can you discuss a little bit about what's the most efficient way to look at my fleet on a monthly or quarterly basis to be able to determine what's due or coming up due versus downloading the entire Excel spreadsheet? And I'm wondering if there's a tool there that can keep me up on my schedule as far as when things are due for their opacity testing.
Yeah, so in terms of like, so I'll answer the second question first, then go back to the first one if that's okay.
Sure.
Just because the second one was a little bit more complex. So in terms of checking your fleet, like monthly or quarterly, whenever you want to do it, um, typically when the monthly email, like the monthly summary email comes in, my advice to most is to just go into your account, and then you should be able to filter the due dates. So in the vehicle list, for example, you can filter the fee due dates. Let me go in and see what it actually says when I do it here. Um, so yeah, so if you click the fee due date in your account, you can like a little calendar icon will pop up, and then you can use the drop down menu to select let's just say is before or equal to, and then you can go into the calendar and then just select the date. So if like you're checking today for the end of March, you would go before or equal to, and then click March 31st, and then click filter, and then it would show any vehicles that have a fee due date, um, either on or before March 31st. And you have that same tool there in the test details section as well. So that would probably be the best way to do it if you want to do it monthly. And then if you want to do it quarterly, you'll just need to pick, if you were doing it quarterly, for example, and you're looking at it today, you could go to like May 30th or 31st. I forget how many days are in May.
Yeah.
Or you could go to like June 30th, for example, something like that.
So the vehicle is just for the fees, and then the test details is the for when the test is due.
Correct. Yeah.
Because that was confusing to me because there's two separate dates on these things on the
Yeah.
certificate expiration dates.
Yeah. That can definitely be a little bit confusing. But what you'll mainly want to look at is the fee due date and the test due date. And then just to throw another idea out there, any fees that are due within the next 90 days will be automatically populated in your cart in the fees and payments section. So that's another way to check fee due dates if you want to do it that way. It's a little bit easier than working the filter for the test due dates.
I deactivated a vehicle last week, but I don't see it come off on my portal. I'm just wondering how often you guys update these portals.
It should update immediately. We do run into some issues with that sometimes where maybe there was something not entered correctly in the form, or maybe the form just wasn't completely submitted. If you want to email the HDIM email address, we can send you kind of a step-by-step guide on how to make sure your vehicle is deactivated properly.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll look like a lot of steps, but in reality, it's not, going to take you a ton of time. It's just, kind of hitting on every single little thing that you need to do to make sure that the information in the form is correct and that the form is submitted properly. But yeah, we do hear about that a lot. And usually it's either you didn't click deactivate in step 5 of that vehicle form, or you click deactivate, but then you didn't submit it in step 7. And it's pretty common to hear that. And usually, once you get those steps, it should be pretty easy to handle.
So fair to say, if I don't see a change in the portal, it's probably user error.
Yeah, I mean, there are some issues. There are occasional issues where the form doesn't process correctly. And in that case, usually what our recommendation is to go ahead and try to use a private window to do that, because that just removes like any cookies or anything that might be interfering with what the system needs to do. So, and then if that doesn't work, then we look into it on our end, and it usually gets resolved within a day or two.
Okay. Does it fall off my list?
It should, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then regarding your first question, were you trying to download like all the certificates at once?
Well, because you guys have on one of the tabs where it's basically all like a kind of a notification tab on the main screen, and it says your certificates are ready for download. Maybe I need to go into the actual vehicle section where I can see the fee due dates and click that tab for download all certificates. Is that possible?
Yeah, you could try that.
Okay.
And then if you're maybe talking about the affirmation of fleet-wide compliance, I don't know if you've used that at all yet. There are occasional issues that we run into with that also can get fixed pretty quickly. But yeah, for downloading all the certificates, I would go actually into the vehicles, like into the My Entity portion, and then go to the vehicle list and click that.
Okay. I think that's all I have. I've taken up enough time. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Brian. Okay. Before we go to Chris and Steven, I see you have raised hands. We'll get to you in just a moment. Tony, I wanted to read a question from the Q&A from Darlene Stevens. She says the CTC database had a December 31st, 2025 due date for a number of her trucks. They started testing in December. Then the CTC database changed the date to March 31st of 2026. The trucks we paid the fee and tested are still showing we owe the fee and testing by March 31st, 2026. Do we need to test again and pay the fee again, even though we paid the fee and tested in December?
So I would email the HDIM email address about that just so we can kind of look into it a little bit more. I don't have the time to go into it necessarily right now, but we do
Sure.
go through a bunch of things when those situations happen, just to verify specific things like if DMV registration renewal date changed or something like that. So yeah, go ahead and send us an email. Make sure to pretty clearly like state your issue, and give us all the affected VINs, things like that, and we'll take a look into it and see what we can get sorted out.
Okay, thanks, Tony. And do you know if they said they started testing in December? Let's say a few of their tests were late for some of their trucks and they didn't enter it until January. Would the CTC database have the 12/31, or would it automatically move it to March 31st? Does that automatically change if you're late or no?
I mean, so if you're late for a test, it should, unless you get some kind of enforcement action against the vehicle, it should. So, say you're, a day or two late for the test, it should still count for that previous cycle and then it should update. In this case, it sounds like it should have updated to June 30th of 2025. But again, we would kind of need to look a little bit further into that on our end.
2026, you mean?
2026. Yeah.
Yeah.
My
Okay.
bad.
Okay.
Still kind of in 2025 over here.
No problem. Darlene, I hope that helps. You have the email there at the bottom of the slide on your screen. Go ahead and email them, and they can help you out there. And if you have any follow-up questions, please let us know. If you want to have any other questions answered, but on that issue, please email hdim@arb.ca.gov. Thank you, Darlene. All right, our next raised hand, Chris Abby. I hope I'm saying your name right. Go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
That's correct. Thank you.
Go ahead, Chris.
The industry that I work in is a water truck industry, and one of our main customers is CAL FIRE. They hire water trucks in the summer to refill their fire engines on these big wildland fires. I have several people that other owners like myself that are telling me that this year in particular, their older trucks, older than 2010, they registered on an SE plate and were not required to do CARB registration or get a compliance test. Is that correct, or did they skirt the system, or is there a loophole to work in that area?
It's possible that they skirted the system a little bit on that. If they renewed their registration before the actual renewal date, that might have been what happened there. You can go ahead and email us about that one too, just so we can get maybe a little bit more information and just kind of see what went on with it, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So generally speaking, sorry, Chris. Generally speaking, let's just take it as a hypothetical and not use the water trucks Chris is talking about specifically. If they renew as an SE plate, that doesn't automatically let them off the hook. But what about any sort of emergency operations or anything like that?
Well, these are private contractors that have construction water trucks, but that work under the authority of CAL FIRE on a contract basis in the summertime.
Okay, and Tony, would the CAL FIRE part of this, again, just in the abstract, should that make any sort of distinction?
It might. In this specific case, the emergency vehicle exemption would get a little tricky. We'd be getting a little bit into the weeds with it because, most of the emergency vehicles we deal with are, fire trucks or, like law enforcement vehicles, military tactical, things like that. So that would be a good topic to email us about so we can, just go a little bit more in depth with, the emergency exemption, and what might have happened with these vehicles. I know there was a lot of outreach done with SE vehicles because this was, that fifth year where SE vehicles would need to re-register. So yeah, I would just email us about that, give us as much information as you have. And then we can work with you that way regarding it. Just again, not to get too in the weeds with stuff here. I want to be a little bit sensitive with the time and, this could be a, 10, 15-minute talk, frankly.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, next raised hand we have Stephen Gutierrez. Stephen, go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
How's it going?
Going pretty
I'm
well,
with
Stephen.
I'm with RTA, Riverside Transit Agency. My first year doing this, I'm trying to do a bulk upload for new vehicles purchased. The majority of them have temporary license plates, and on the bulk upload list, it's a required field. I wanted to see how we go about that. Should I just use the temporary plate in place of the real one?
Yeah. Yeah, you can do that. And then what you'd want to do when you get the actual license plates is just go in, as soon as possible after each vehicle gets its plate and make that change in CTC Viz. If they get a compliance certificate before you get those new plates, that certificate will not show the new plate, even if you update it in the system. But it would show for the next cycle, assuming compliance requirements are met, if that makes sense. Because the information on the compliance certificate is captured at the moment that compliance is met. So say you met compliance, today for one of these vehicles, but then you get the new plate and put it in the system tomorrow, the current certificate still wouldn't show that plate just because the information was already captured, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Stephen, thank you so much for your question. Okay, so right now we have no more raised hands. I'm going to go over to the Q&A box again. We have a question about an attest. Why is there attestation a requirement within 30 days of adding or removing vehicles? It says when there is an annual attestation requirement. So, and then what sections of the regulation require attestations? Tony, before you go ahead, I will just say that we require updates whenever your fleet changes, so we understand who's responsible for compliance. We don't want to hold you compliant or responsible when you no longer own a truck, and if you purchase a truck from someone else, we need to know that that other person doesn't know it, and that you are now you are the owner and responsible for compliance. As far as attestations go, that is one way that we can hold stakeholders accountable and get updated when there are changes. As far as the regulation, Tony, I don't know if they're specifically what sections of the regulations require attestations. I don't know if they're mentioned in that context, and I know that's a hard question to answer offhand.
Yeah, I don't have the exact sections in mind, but the attestations are indeed in the regulation. In terms of the attestation for 30 days of adding or moving vehicles, it's not necessarily an attestation requirement. It's more of, you should remove this vehicle from your account within 30 days of, so you should add or remove this vehicle from your account within 30 days of either purchasing or selling the vehicle. And again, like Anthony said, that's more of us not, wanting to hold you accountable for a vehicle that you either no longer own, or making sure that, there's accountability there for a vehicle that was purchased within that 30-day window. For example, I know there's a section in the regulation about brand new vehicles. If, they are not added into the system within 30 days of purchase, then, you will not qualify for, essentially skipping that first test that they would owe. So say you buy a new 2026, you bought it in January, you just added it today, that vehicle would not qualify for that first essentially waive test since it's a brand new vehicle, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Tony. And I'll also say that if you need help finding the regulatory language online and you'd like to take a look and do a control find and look up the language yourself, you can do that. And if you need help finding it, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to provide you with the link.
And I believe the annual attestation you're talking about is the attestation of fleet-wide compliance. That's mostly used by brokers and contractors to ensure that your entire fleet is compliant at that time. And you would, that's not something necessarily that we take into account when we are talking about holding vehicle owners accountable. It's more for specific vehicles or, number of vehicles in their fleet. And then that kind of starts to delve into more enforcement territory, which I can't speak too much on since I'm not in enforcement. I'm more than happy to give a contact email for enforcement if you would like it. But I can't dive too much into that currently. And again, just don't want to get into a long-winded answer and
Sure.
waste.
So that's all right. And I don't know if I'm saying your name right, Syra. If you can email us your questions about, I see you have some follow-up ones here. We're not going to go through and try to pour over the regulatory language live when we have people waiting to answer questions. So if you can contact hjim@arb.ca.gov, they can provide you with any information that you're curious about. So I'm going to dismiss your question for now, but that doesn't mean we can't help you going forward. All right, next we're going to go back to the raised hands. Mike Becerra, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, Mike. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a few questions, kind of piggybacking on some of the questions that were going.
Yeah, and please let's do one at a time.
Sure.
Just
I'll
it's
do one at a
easier
time.
because if we do two or three, then we have to ask you to repeat anyway. So let's do one question at a time.
Perfect. First question, number one question, and this comes from Amazon a lot, requirements. I own some trucks and I own some owner operators, and some of them get a certificate under their name and then they end up switching their name to a corporation. Now Amazon wants their certificate to be read as a corporation. Is there anything we can do about that to switch the account from individual to corporation, or a name change on that same account, or do they have to open a new account?
So that's more of an Amazon policy that we don't necessarily have any control over. You can change the entity legal name.
Okay.
Although on individual accounts, it might be a little bit more difficult. But basically, the way we usually take with this is to consult with Amazon on that. I know that doesn't sound ideal, but we just don't have any authority over what they require and, basically what they ask for. In terms of what we consider for compliance, it's strictly the VIN and the compliance status and whether or not the current certificate is valid at the time. So I would maybe see if you can get in contact with Amazon about that. And, I've referred plenty of people to Amazon to ask about this, and typically we don't hear from them moving forward. So at least to me and my team, that means they've been able to work it out with Amazon. But I guess my general advice would be to make sure that each account has the correct name on it and, talk with these owner operators and make sure that, they maybe don't want to or don't have any plans to switch, to like a company name or something like that. There's just not a lot we control in terms of, what Amazon requires essentially. So I know it can be a bit annoying with that.
I had a situation where a client went from individual during the year, and then they had to renew their certificate and it popped out their name. But at that time, I guess his DOT and MC number went to a corporation. So Amazon says, well, I need your certificate to be a corporation now, but we couldn't change it on the system. So I was just trying to figure out if there's a way to do it, or we got to just apply as a new CTC account.
I mean, you could always do a new account. I know that's not the most ideal scenario, but if it really comes down to that, and Amazon is, we've quite frankly, we've talked to them about this before and tried to, tell them, hey, like, this is what we require. We understand you're your own individual entity. You can, do things like you want, but, things won't necessarily change to their liking all the time. But the only thing, the consistents are the VIN, the compliance status, and the certificate. Those are the three
Gotcha.
consistents that won't
Correct.
really change. So
Perfect. Okay, that makes sense. I'll talk to them more about it then. I do have somebody I can talk to. But my other question was really quick with this was, for example, I have clients that their certificate is due on December 31st, for example, but I want to renew it earlier than that. Do I have to wait till December 31st to get the new certificate? Can I get it before? How does that work?
yeah, so if they've met compliance requirements for the current cycle, so let's use your example. Say they test their vehicle and pay their fee December 1st, the vehicle passes. You can click on the VIN in the account and then scroll down to the certificate section, and there should be an updated certificate there within 1 to 2 business days of when the compliance requirements were met. So let's just use this for example. They meet compliance requirements on the 1st, the certificate generates on the 2nd. You should be able to download it on the 2nd, and then you'll see in that certificate section, the issue date would be, we'll just use December 26th. It would say 12-02-26. And then assuming, the compliance deadline for that cycle was 12/31/26, the expiration date for the new certificate should be 6/30/2027.
So there is a way to get a certificate before the expiration, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, just click on the VIN and scroll down to certificates.
Got it. Perfect. And then my other question, regarding the 2012 older vehicles getting tested, are they able to register here in California still, 2012 and older? I mean, and older vehicles, as long as they pass the test, or is that something different?
It's kind of different. So if they have a 2010 or newer engine, they'll be assuming, it has, DEF, DPF, all that. It should be compliant with truck and bus.
Okay.
But pre-2010 engine is, subject to truck and bus, and I don't want to get too much into that. But, so for example, the 2012 and 2011s should be good. I have seen a few cases where there's an 09 engine in a 12, but those are very rare. So as long as the engine model years 2010 or newer, it should be good in terms of truck and bus. And then as long as they're compliant with Clean Truck Check, they should be able to register.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. That was all my questions. Appreciate it.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Next raised hand, we have Rosario Juarez. Rosario, go ahead and unmute your microphone, please.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
We sure can, Rosario. How can we help you?
Okay, so I have a question. I did already email you guys. This is regarding a vehicle that is no longer in California, but I have not been able to get a title from DMV because there's, I believe, a CARB hold on it due to it needing a clean truck check. When I emailed you guys said, please send the following documents: a Reg 227 application for replacement or transfer of title, and a Reg 102 planned non-operation form. So I guess my question is, do you guys want me to just scan this over, number one, and then what do I do with it after that? And number two, there is a lien holder on this title. So would I need to complete like our portion and then send that over to the lien holder and have them complete their portion so that it could be signed?
Yeah, I believe so. Do you remember the name of the staff member you were working with on that?
Let me see if there's a name here. It's Kiana. She's the one that.
Yeah. So I would just check that with her and just make sure. I would ask her basically the same questions that you just asked me. She's one of our main DMV people. So she should be able to help you out with that and just make sure that, you're getting everything submitted that you need to. I know things with lien holders can get a little bit more complicated. So yeah, just ask her, and you can go ahead and scan over those 2 documents if you have them that you previously mentioned. And then, I would ask her about the lien holder just to make sure that everything's kind of lined up for this to be handled.
Yeah, I will say this has not been easy. I've been working on it since October. So
yeah, the out of state, the holds can get a little rough. But you are working with the right person to help you through it.
Okay, I'll email her back. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Rosario. All right. Quick time check. We have up to about 50 minutes left to our typical 2 hour mark. We currently only have two more raised hands. If you are thinking about answering a question, especially verbally, the earlier you raise your hand, the better, so we can better manage our time from here until the end of the webinar. We've already had 73 or so questions answered. We have a few staff besides Tony and myself standing by to answer those questions as quickly as possible. So we have the capacity to have a lot more questions answered for as much as the next 50 minutes. So just want to remind everyone of that. And with that, we'll go over to Greg Barron, who is next. Greg, please unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello, Greg. We can hear you. How can we help you today?
Well, I just was got my question answered on the Q&A, but I mean I was told that the federal government is not allowing and doesn't need, I mean, is denying the smog check program that California is enforcing. Is that true?
No. So it is not a climate change reg, and therefore it is within the power lies with the California state legislature on that matter.
Okay. Yeah, and what I was saying in my question, I have dump trucks that work in construction. I only drive sometimes only 50 miles a day, and the guy who checked my check engine light, he said I had to do 16 warm-ups and drive 400 miles before I could get it cleared. And I was getting close to my registration renewing, and that was just like super hassle. I mean, why does it have to be so severe like that? If it's fixed, it's fixed.
16 sounds like a high number to me. Typically, well, it kind of depends on the engine manufacturer in that case.
Cummins, it was a Cummins X15 and a PACCAR MX13, both of them.
Yeah, so in that case, what I would do is I would go ahead and meet the required warm-up cycles, the required mileage. If you do run past your registration renewal date, or you're getting really close and you're afraid it might not be able to meet the readiness criteria, you can always apply for a 5-day pass for clean truck check. But the more important thing would be to ask DMV for a temporary operating permit, which I don't know the exact amount of time you can get on that. It might be variable. I just don't want to speak on that too much since it's DMV that makes that determination. But if you get those two things, it shouldn't be an issue for that vehicle to meet, the readiness criteria and then get tested again, pass the test, and then you can renew registration.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Greg, you're doing the right thing when you have trouble. This goes for everyone too, for letting us know, emailing HDIM. That way we know that you are trying to rectify the situation prior to your deadline. You're making a good faith effort, and that's the best way to start when something goes wrong. So Tony gave you the advice and steps you could take, but the first step for anyone is letting us know when there's a problem or concern. So that's the best way for us to help you out.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Next raised hand, we have Robin Vargas. Robin, go ahead and unmute your microphone, please.
Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon. How can we help you?
So I work for DMV. So we have, just to touch base on the temporary operating permit for CARB non-compliance, we only give out a 2-day moving permit. We don't give out months. We don't give out the red temporary permits anymore.
Okay.
So to touch on that, we have a lot of customers coming in. They're bringing in their certificates. They're bringing in the $30 receipt, and they're going on 3 weeks to almost a month. And our systems are still showing as CARB non-compliant. How do we direct the customer? Just have them call Clean Truck Check?
So they could either email us or call the call center. I know some of those. I actually just dealt with a case today where they were compliant with Clean Truck Check, but they had some older vehicles that were non-compliant with truck and bus. And so that was the holdup, essentially. So that might be what's going on with some of those cases. And like we were talking about earlier, the 5-year SE, registration renewal deadline just hit at the end of 2025. And I know a lot of older vehicles are SE plated vehicles. So I don't want to generalize, but that could be the majority, if not all the cases in that regard.
So if they have a hold on a different vehicle, that can affect their current vehicle?
Can you say that again?
So you said even if the current vehicle that they're questioning is clear and it is compliant, that you said they may have older vehicles that were not compliant, and that would affect their registration clearance for the vehicle that they're coming into DMV for?
No. So what I'm saying is it would be, so say somebody comes in, tries to re-register a 2008 model year, heavy duty diesel vehicle, right? So they might be compliant with clean truck check, but the vehicle might not be compliant with the truck and bus regulation. And that could be what's causing the holdup.
Okay, so those would be one of the vehicles that need to be taken and sold out of state because they can't register in California.
Potentially, they could also reach out to the general hotline and see if they have any compliance options for the vehicle. I won't comment too much on those since it is a separate program, but I'm sure you guys have that hotline number that you can give out to folks.
Yeah, and then one last question. We had a customer come in and he took a dump truck and he converted it into a camper truck. He modified it and everything. So is he going to be quarterly, or is he going to fall under like the motorhome once a year type deal?
So as long as we can verify the motorhome conversion on our end, he would have to. So first, he would want to email us. Basically, just state the concern. We would refer him over to the CARB referee, who would do either a virtual or in-person inspection, who would verify that the vehicle has indeed been converted to a motorhome. And then if we are able to confirm that, then he would be able to go towards onto that annual motorhome testing schedule.
I see. Okay, because I'm dealing with that particular customer right now at work. It's a 2006 International. So he got compliance, he got everything. We did the verification, and now he's being told that there's a ghost hold on the vehicle, and I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I've never heard of that term either. It sounds as if he just maybe hasn't verified that it's a motorhome necessarily with the clean truck check staff, or maybe with the truck and bus staff potentially. Just go ahead and have him email us and give us the VIN, and then we can look into that from our end and get him sent in the right direction.
Got it. Okay, thank you guys.
You're welcome. All right, so I see Anthony's muted, so it looks like we do have another hand up. Jeanette, I'll go ahead. I believe I can unmute you. Yeah, there we go. All right, you were unmuted, so go ahead and unmute your mic.
Hi, thank you so much for this. This is really good information. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. We are a state entity, exempt state entity, and we have a 2003 Peterbilt with the original 2002 Cummins engine. I have tried now with 2 CARB vendors to get this tested, and it will not pass because we are missing the engine labels. Is the only way for me to do this to contact Cummins and get a letter?
Yeah, so you can ask and see if they will reissue the ECL.
Okay.
But in the meantime, because that can take a while to get there, right?
Yeah, and I'm non-compliant, and it's driving me crazy. It's my only vehicle in my whole fleet, and it's driving me crazy.
Yeah, I get that. So you can ask them to reissue the emission control label, but you can also ask them to provide a letter that might reach you a little bit sooner than that label would, with the information that would be on the ECL with it, and then present that to a tester. The tester should know what to do with that, because usually in their comments they'll put, they'll include the letter, and then they'll put it in their comments like they provided a letter that has all the ECL information on it. The vehicle might need a manual test override once the tester submits it, but that's something that should be done same day.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, he's certainly very proficient and has kind of directed me in which way to go. But how should I notify CARB to let them know, hey, this is the situation, we're working on it, we're not just sitting here not getting something compliant?
Like Anthony said earlier, just go ahead and email us and let us know the situation. And then, as soon as you're able to get that letter from the manufacturer, I don't know if they're always physical letters. I don't know if some are emailed because I've only seen a few and they've been in a virtual format. Get that over to the tester, get that tested, and then make sure the ECL is installed as soon as possible.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You're welcome, Jeanette. And I'll also add, sorry, Tony, kind of speak for your team a little bit here, but I'll go out on a limb. If you have a conversation with the manufacturer via email, go ahead and attach, what you've sent and what you've heard from the manufacturer, even if it's not the letter that is ultimately what you need. That way, you don't have to try to interpret and relay everything in your own words, which I know can be kind of hard. And then our staff will have access to make sure you're asking the right thing to the manufacturer and what the manufacturer is telling you.
Wonderful. Can I just copy you guys on the email, keep you in the loop, or?
Feel free.
I'm happy to do that.
That way you don't have to play translator for stuff. When all these different organizations may speak a little different language, and that way our staff can just, rather than you playing tag here, going playing telephone, we can, our staff can see exactly what you all are telling each other.
No, I appreciate that because it was just kind of, I've got a hold of someone super old school, even more so than me at Cummins, and I'm pretty sure they had no idea that a woman would know what an ECL was or, so getting it on email would be great. I really appreciate you guys so much.
Yep.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll go to our next raised hand. Aaron Bednar. I hope I said your name right, Aaron. Go ahead and unmute yourself, please. Looks like you're on the phone. Still looks like you're muted. We don't have any other raised hands, Aaron, so we'll wait for you to unmute yourself here for a minute. And hopefully you can ask your question. Your talking has been permitted. We just need you. There we go. You're unmuted.
Okay, there we go. Hi, I work for county, and we've got a couple of vehicles that are larger that are exempt, and we have one that is county sheriff we call it our command van, but it's like an incident command post that goes out to large incidents. It's got all the radios, all the floodlights, all of the everything that a sheriff might need in any type of event. And we had it exempt for a while in the system, and then recently we got it kicked back, that it is no longer exempt, but I'm rereading the definition of what constitutes an exempt vehicle and wondering why it might no longer be considered exempt.
So in that case, it sounds like you just may need to provide some additional documentation in the system. Because we do periodic sweeps of vehicles that previously claimed an emergency exemption, but didn't necessarily provide the supporting documentation because there was a point in the system where the documentation wasn't necessarily required and it was implemented shortly after that began. So if you want to email us about that, we can kind of walk you through that process. There is a spot in the system when you're like editing a vehicle's information or adding a new vehicle where you can upload supporting documentation. So you would just want to get that documentation, upload it in there. And as long as, that documentation supports that the vehicle does meet the emergency vehicle criteria, you should be granted that exemption. And if it gets kicked back again, feel free to email us again and just kind of, one of us would be more than happy to walk you through maybe what's missing and maybe how to obtain anything that is missing if possible.
Okay, because our heavy equipment supervisor, he did email in photos to the HDIM. It has the big logos displayed all over the side of it, and he's like, I don't understand. So, maybe it's some other piece of documentation that we're missing. It is a diesel engine, so we understand, but also at the same time, it only goes out when there's an incident. So, it gets a little frustrating sometimes.
Yeah. And, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the emergency exemption can get a little in the weeds with specific things. But go ahead and email us and we can provide some materials for you with how to, verify an exemption and things like that. And then we'd be more than happy to work with you to make a final determination on this vehicle.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay, so we have two more raised hands and no open questions. This will be the first last call. We are coming up on the hour and a half mark where we typically see the questions die off, and it's usually around then that the webinars end. Like I said before, we can go till 3 o'clock. I'm just gonna do my first last call here for if you're planning on asking a question, please raise your hand or enter it in the Q&A box as soon as possible. We have 3 raised hands, and we'll get back to those here. Victor Pacheco, go ahead and unmute your microphone, please.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Victor. There is an echo.
Okay, let me. That's fine. I will type my questions. Don't worry.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Victor. Sorry about that. Okay, we're going to go back to Leanne Langford. Leanne, please go ahead and unmute yourself. How can we help you today? Looks like you're still on mute, Leanne. We'll give you a few more seconds, and then we'll pop back over to Brian because there's. Okay.
There we go.
Yep, you're unmuted, Leanne. Can you try talking, please? Okay, Leanne, I'm going to mute you again for now. We'll come right back to you. We cannot hear you. You unmuted yourself, but we can't hear you. So we'll come back to you in a moment. Brian Fomenko, go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Okay. Quick question here. Do you have any other videos that are specific to tutorials on the ECL labeling and how to properly read them for the testers?
Oh boy, that's a good question. We don't necessarily have any videos on that, but we do have, let me check here. I believe that there is a yeah, there is an ECL checklist that is on the actual testing form. And in terms of how to read an ECL, you'll just want to make sure that the ECL is intact. The main thing that you'll want to look for on the ECL is the engine family name. In some cases, it's referred to as the emissions family name. I believe that's mostly on Navistar engines. And then, just as long as the ECL is, generally pretty legible and all that, it should give you the basic emissions components, such as DPF, which is sometimes referred to as a PTOX in some cases. Again, that's mostly a Navistar thing. We do plan to put out some more guidance on an ECL checklist, which we are currently working on. I don't know if we'll make a video about that or not. I know the tester training course does somewhat go into, how to read an ECL, but it's not overly in depth. But like I said, we are working on an ECL checklist item that I'm not entirely sure when we'll be able to put it out because I know it's still in the works. And I wouldn't want to give a specific date and then have that not be the case. But we are working on that currently right now.
That would be a good helpful tool because when I go through the checklist, I need to know if it's got an EGR that I need to check whether it's going to pass or need repair, cabinet induction systems, NOx O2. Some of the things aren't always visual, but and maybe they are, but I need to know what to look for specific to each vehicle as well too. Because right now I'm going off of old tests and saying, okay, the last guy that did this looked for these items, so I go back and look for those items. But if I'm putting my name to it, I want to make sure that I'm properly reading that label and I'm checking off the stuff that's expected from you guys. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, another thing you could do, and this thought just occurred to me. So if you just go to the general CARB homepage, like not the Clean Truck Check page or anything like that, just the general California Air Resources homepage, if you have an engine family name, you can type it into the search bar there and access the executive order for it, which should give you the information on all the emissions equipment that's on the vehicle. Again, the ECL itself should be legible and readable, at least at a minimum. But if if you're getting a little confused or something, those executive orders do actually lay it out a little bit more clearly than what might be on the the emission control label. So again, take the engine family name, plug it into that search function. You should see an executive order pop up with the first result. You might need to hit Control F and then paste the engine family name in that little search bar that pops up kind of on the right-hand side of the screen. And then if you hit enter, it should take you to that exact engine family name, and you would just click on the hyperlink, and that should bring up the executive order for that engine family name.
Okay.
And like I said, it's definitely more clear than most emission control labels because everything's just kind of there in one row. So again, PTOX, EGR, all the other stuff that might be on the engine should be right there.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Brian.
Let's see, did Victor? Okay.
We have no open questions at the moment. Victor, we are working on answering your written question right now. That'll pop up here in a minute for you. So I'll do our last call for questions. We've had quite a few people drop off, as usually happens towards the end of these webinars. I'll give everyone another minute or so to go ahead and ask questions before we end the webinar. So if you have anything you'd like to ask, there's no queue right now. You'll get it answered very quick. So last chance to get your questions answered. All right. Give people a few more seconds in case they're typing. But it looks like we are reaching the end. While we're waiting, I want to thank CARB staff here today for your time and efforts in getting all these questions answered so quickly, and Randy for doing the presentation. I also want to thank all of you for attending, providing you with information and answering your questions, and making sure you have everything you need in order to comply with Clean Truck Check is by far the best way to get the emission reductions that this regulation aims to achieve. So we enjoy making ourselves available, and we really appreciate you all joining and for asking questions today. And with that, we have one more. We have one last question, I think. Jorge Urias, I'll go ahead and just address this one live. He asked about useful life of trucks, heavy-duty trucks, 18 years or 800,000 miles. I don't know if Clean Truck Check, Tony, does that address any useful life? That might have been another regulation he's referring to.
Yeah, that's not Clean Truck Check. So if you know the contact information for the call center, go ahead and ask them that question. Yeah, I don't believe that's currently in effect.
Right. That might have been another regulation, but that's not, an official across the board stance for all of our regs. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you everyone again for participating and for joining us today. If you received a email notification for this webinar, then you're on our mailing list and you continue to subscribe to that mailing list, you will be notified the next time we do one of these, which should be in the next month or two at the latest. So we look forward to seeing you again. Yes, Michael, we are testing trucks by engine year, not chassis year. Thank you very much. We'll conclude with that. Thanks everyone again.